we okay? Well, I am delighted to be here. I'm a newcomer. I just want to make sure you understand there will be a quiz after this, and any mistakes that I make are Ted's fault. So, all right. The title of this is Chorus Girls. And at the top, let me say, my interest in chorus girls is, alas, purely academic. New York in the first half of the 20th century was famous for its chorus girls. I missed that New York. I went to Raymond's Revue Bar in London, and I went to the Crazy Horse in Paris, but they played for out-of-towners, like Las Vegas. The classic era of chorus girls in New York was strictly hometown. In those years, thousands of girls worked the chorus lines in the clubs and shows and extravaganzas like the Follies. In one casting call for a Follies show, 500 women auditioned. It was a big deal. Now, New York's chorus line had several godfathers. One was English musical comedy, which included a line of gorgeously attired, beautiful girls called ballet girls. Interesting. Impresario George Edwards established the Gaiety Theater in 1885. It would become the spiritual home of musical comedy, and his Gaiety girls were soon world famous, setting the pattern for all others who would try to copy. Now, New York had seen undressed women on stage. Before the Civil War, theaters offered tableaux vivants, women posing as figures in a mythological diorama, maybe Psyche going to the bath, or Venus rising from the sea. Not nude, but wearing a body stocking. Soon the tableau part fell away, and nude bodies, or at least bodies that appeared to be nude, became the main idea. These artist models became so common on New York stages that they were incorporated into productions like The Black Crook at Niblo's Garden in 1866, the first Broadway musical. The other godfather, looking also to England, was our more raucous burlesque. The English style was popularized by a visiting British burlesque troupe, Lydia Thompson and the British Blondes, came to New York in 1868. New York burlesque built on these and on our earlier tradition of minstrel shows with songs and ribald comics and acrobats and magicians and solo singers all wrapped up. And all this led to two main venues in the late 19th century. Vaudeville, more family-oriented, no chorus girls. Burlesque, lewd, and lots of girls. They played side by side in New York in the early 20th century. Along the way, some part of burlesque moved on to striptease. At first, the ladies showed off their figures while singing and dancing. And then they stopped singing. Chorus lines were news across the land in the 20s and 30s, as the life and possibilities of a chorus girl were sensationalized in fiction, in newspapers, and film. Sex was, of course, always there, but the chorus girl captured the imagination of young women, freer in a new era than ever before, seeking independence, adventure, and a happily ever after. Hollywood, at the same time, was a draw in exactly the same way. Chorus girls were obviously sexy. That was the idea. And some achieved top drawer fame. Headlines like, "Showgirl Miss Virginia Lee engaged to 11 men," major newspaper headline. And books like Madge Merton's Confessions of a Chorus Girl, Grace White's Fallen by the Wayside, or A Chorus Girl's Luck, Frank Deschen's Chorus Girls I Have Known, all of them were eaten up by the public. Now, chorus girls weren't originally the highlight of the show. They were transitional entertainment between main acts or stand-up accessories. but audiences and reporters and hopeful stage door Johnnies scanned the line for the newest beauty, and chorus girls took more and more of the stage. Where'd they come from? First, the born trooper, the real chorus girls, mainstay of the crew who took to the stage from the sheer love of acting. Second, the showgirls, matrimonial fisherwomen whose goal was to land a rich husband. Third, the runaway, the girl who ran away from home imagining she was doing something exciting and romantic. And fourth, the society girl from a wealthy family who took up the stage work as a lark, who were the darlings of the tabloids and might be tolerated purely because of their publicity value. Now, of the thousands, obviously the vast majority labored at a tough life, and most vanished back to here or there unremembered. Still, for a moment, they lived at least on the edge of New York glamour. No matter how it ended, they were the role models for a new generation of younger women on the make. Now, we have to talk about Prohibition. After all, much of this went on under the Volstead Act. And this added, of course, to the edginess. Nightlife in New York boomed with Prohibition. Booze was the allure, but chorus girls were the sweets. Now, in truth, some speakeasies were strictly male, drinking and gambling. But in most, chorus girls were front and center. Tex Ginnon, you remember Tex Ginnon? Never give a sucker an even break. Texas became the hostess and MC at the El Fay Club, one of the city's most infamous speaks. The club on 46th Street near Broadway opened from midnight to 5 a.m. Pleasure-seeking patrons, respectable or not, elbowed one another for the privilege of having Texas empty their wallets. From well-heeled Wall Streeters and Ivy Leaguers savoring big city high life to famous athletes and prominent politicians, good time Charlies from every walk of life converged on El Fay to whoop it up with Texas and her chorus girls. We're told that Babe Ruth, Charlie Lindbergh, Charlie Chaplin, Rudolph Valentino, Clara Bow, Gloria Swanson, England's Lord Mountbatten, and Edward, Prince of Wales all showed up, oogling the chorus girls at Texas's place, at the El Fay Club. And chorus girls uptown. The best jazz in the city, where black musicians played and black chorus girls danced, for downtown white folks who wanted to hear the new jazz craze above 125th Street. Every night, caravans of upper crust clients would flock to the Cotton Club, ignoring Prohibition with gusto. Each night was an out-and-out bacchanal, as Duke Ellington led the house band, with Cab Calloway, Ellington, Louis Armstrong, and others, killing it with songs like Reefer Blues, Kicking the Gong Around, and Cokie Joe. At 16, Lena Horne got her start as a dancer at the Cotton Club. Chorus girls were then paid $25 a week with 3 shows every night. I had my schooling right there in the Cotton Club, she said. I learned from Ethel Waters, Duke Ellington, the whole thing, the whole schmear. That's how we talk there, the whole schmear. Some of the most elegant speaks of the 1930s, El Morocco and the Stork Club, didn't feature elaborate shows with chorus girls. Their entertainment was primarily their dance bands and their glamorous clienteles. However, they did employ young male partners for older women to ensure a lively dance scene. Also, very famous hat check girls. The New York clubs we remembered opened in the 1940s. One of the most famous was the Latin Quarter, opened in 42 by Lou Walters, Barbara Walters' father. That's where Barbara grew up. Throughout the 40s and 50s, the Latin Quarter presented floor shows that featured headliners like Frank Sinatra, Frankie Lane, Ella Fitzgerald. But leggy chorus girls became the headliners themselves. It rivaled the Copacabana, which had opened 2 years earlier, in attracting the rich and famous of post-war World War II New York. This was really the last bastion of New York's gilded chorus girls. We saw them again, dancers now appearing in the theater after the war, but they were part of the plot. They were not the chorus line of old. And the movies. Samuel Goldwyn's dancers, the Golden Girls, appeared in many MGM productions, and included Lucille Ball, Virginia Mayo, Jane Wyman, who went on to find great success in on-screen productions. But these were actors who acted like chorus girls. They were not the real thing. Stories in Life magazine about chorus girls after the war were more likely to emphasize their home life, marriage, and children. The image of a tough, money-chasing chorus broad became a comedic bit. Diamonds are a girl's best friend. So, let's dig a little bit deeper. If we want to talk about chorus girls, we should begin with Florence Ziegfeld. Surely the most famous chorus girls in New York performed in Ziegfeld's Follies, the Ziegfeld Girls. Crowds watched scores of beautiful young women in elaborate and racy outfits. Now, they didn't all sing and dance. Some sashayed around, or they posed. They showed, and this is the take-home. And so chorus girls were rebranded as showgirls. Everyone learned something in one of my lectures. That's where showgirl, they showed. Florence Ziegfeld was the most important producer in the history of the Broadway musical, the unmatched Broadway entertainment entrepreneur. He shared P.T. Barnum's bravura and Tex Ginnon's truth-stretching style. He sailed higher and influenced more than either of them. His business card read, Impresario Extraordinaire, and the title was well-deserved. Ziegfeld's father was a German immigrant, a well-educated mayor of a small German town, and the founder and director of the Chicago Musical College. His son, Florence, was expected to follow in his path, but the color and excitement of the musical theater proved irresistible. New York theaters at the turn of the century lacked a figure who could fuse the naughty sexuality of New York's streets and saloons and burlesque shows with the elegance of cafe society. What it lacked was Flo Ziegfeld. Over his long career, Ziegfeld reshaped the American musical, achieving enormous fame and influence. But he struggled through dry periods as well, worsened by his gambling and always by women. Now, the first phase of his career was built around a French performer, Anna Held, who in fact was the daughter of a Polish-Jewish seamstress and had performed in London's Yiddish theaters. But her colorful French accent, her 18-inch waist, her hourglass figure, and coquettish personality captivated Ziegfeld. His flim-flammery blossomed. Held took milk baths to enhance her soft skin. Not true. Ziegfeld loudly sued a dairy for providing sour milk. Not true. And he announced that women all over the country were draining dairies for their own milk baths. That wasn't true either. But Anna created a persona of gaiety, champagne, naughtiness, and high kicks, and the press loved her. In 1907, Ziegfeld unveiled his most enduring legacy, the lavish revues. Soon renamed the Ziegfeld Follies, they were packed with wildly talented performers. Fanny Brice, Ruth Edding, W.C. Fields, Eddie Cantor, Marilyn Miller, and Will Rogers all performed regularly at the Follies. The best songs by Irving Berlin, by George Gershwin, and Jerome Kern. With elaborate costumes and sets and featuring beautiful Ziegfeld girls, chosen personally by Flo Ziegfeld. Ziegfeld is said to have interviewed 15,000 women a year for a quarter of a century. 3,000 became Ziegfeld girls. We'll have to figure out how many a week that would be. And the Follies played annually until 1931. By the way, many popular songs warbled out of Ziegfeld's productions, most of which are long forgotten, but some are eternal. Shine on Harvest Moon, A Bicycle Built for Two, Row, row, row your boat, and By the Light of the Silvery Moon. Not things we'd expect from Ziegfeld Follies. Who knew that Shine on Harvest Moon came out of a Ziegfeld show sung by torture Ruth Edding, and maybe remember Doris Day portrayed Edding's tough life in Love Me or Leave Me. And women. Apparently a lot of women. Ziegfeld's very public pursuit of showgirl Lillian Lorraine, a temperamental beauty whose taste for alcohol and monumental tantrums would plague Ziegfeld as their on-again, off-again love affair spread over 2 decades. One night, Lorraine accused Fanny Bryce of trying to steal one of her wealthy boyfriends. The resulting backstage brawl ended with a triumphant Bryce dragging a tattered Lorraine by her hair across the stage to the delight of the audience. Ziegfeld continued to produce book shows as well as the Follies. The most famous was Showboat in 27, with Jerome Kern's songs that remain jewels in the canon of show music. Now, obviously you remember, this wasn't just the music. The Showboat was so different in portraying race relations in the United States. It was quite an unbelievable thing. And Ziegfeld did that. Not sure he wanted to, but he did, and it was incredibly important. Ziegfeld had reached the apex of his career. He was the undisputed king of Broadway, and all show business looked upon him as something of a living legend. But there's more. Tired of seeing his audiences leave after Folly performances to spend money at other people's nightclubs, Ziegfeld staged a late-night review. In the New Amsterdam's underused rooftop theater, the stage would roll back, revealing a dance floor. Chorus girls danced down a glass walkway, right above the customers seated below. Later called the Midnight Frolic, the shows were a lot spicier than the Follies. The girls shimmying down the glass walkway above the audiences were urged to wear bloomers, but the rule wasn't always followed. Audience members were asked to vote for the young lady considered the most beautiful. The winner during the run of that frolic had her salary doubled. That surely encouraged more extravagant frolics, I'm sure. Critics loved it. The latest, one review, and I quote it, one review, the latest edition of Florence Ziegfeld's Midnight Frolic, which had its first presentation Monday midnight before an audience that embraced all who live and move and have their being in Broadway, out Ziegfeld's all of its predecessors. It is like the others, only more so. It is a Ziegfeld show of beautiful women, frocks, and tableaus designed for the businessman who is too tired to go home after the play. You can't beat that, can you? I have to do that. First presentation Monday midnight before an audience that embraced all who live and move and have their being in Broadway. That's really good stuff, I think. I wish I could write like that. One might search the world and not find anything quite as unique or lavish as this midnight review. Thinking about Ziegfeld girls, First, for quite a few, his shows became a step to wider fame. And second, they were often very young when they danced on Ziegfeld's stage. At 19, Marion Davies appeared in the Follies of 1916. She would meet William Randolph Hearst there, who had backed several Ziegfeld shows and would have famous careers in Hollywood and as Hearst's mistress. Louise Brooks was there at 19. Paula Goddard appeared in a Ziegfeld show at 16. Barbara Stanwyck was 16 in the Ziegfeld Follies of 1922. And a sidebar, just a sidebar for a moment about Barbara Stanwyck. Reveals a good deal about the other side of the chorus girls. Born in 1907, Ruby Stevens, that was her real name, grew up dead poor in an abusive environment. She didn't attend high school, and at 14 went to work. Just before her 16th birthday, Ruby joined the chorus at a nightclub over the Strand Theater in Times Square. She was also a chorus girl at Tex Ginnon's nightclubs and a dance instructor at a gay and lesbian speak Ginnon owned. And she danced in the 22 and 23 seasons of the Ziegfeld Follies. Other Ziegfeld alums included Olive Thomas, Mae Murray, Billy Dove, Franny Bryce, Ruth Etting, Ruby Keeler, and Marilyn Miller. Others, Norma Shearer, Mae West, Joan Crawford, and Janet Gaynor, tried out but didn't make it. It's hard to imagine Mae West as a Ziegfeld girl somehow, or for that matter, Norma Shearer. Some Ziegfeld girls were just drop dead gorgeous. On a gloomy winter evening, warm up with Alfred Cheney Johnson's absolutely stunning photographs of the Ziegfeld girls. Alfred Cheney Johnson, just unbelievable, beautiful things. Not everyone was famous, but some managed a good life. The Times ran an article about the Ziegfeld Club, a club made up of former Ziegfeld girls, and several lines caught my eye. Sure, I had a sugar daddy, Vi Phillips said. Invested $5,000 and I got a part in one of the shows. He even gave me a diamond bracelet, and I disliked diamonds intensely. What I really wanted was an emerald, but I never got one. He had a wife and 6 kids at home, but in those days, you had friends. Madeline Corter recalls, I remember champagne parties where there were $100 bills under the plates. She had the most prestigious job in the 1927 Follies, a showgirl. And later she achieved the Follies girl's dream, landing a millionaire husband, Joseph A. Corter. Ziegfeld was often broke and suffered massive losses in the Wall Street crash. He borrowed money from his chum, Diamond Jim Brady. His third wife, the showgirl and actress Billie Burke, remember her from Glinda, the Good Witch in Wizard of Oz, supported him and his business with her Hollywood career. Ziegfeld cheated constantly, but Billie Burke worked tirelessly for decades after his death to settle his debts. One last reflection. I recall seeing in several noir films a small crew of girls dancing at restaurants and Chinese restaurants. Clubs served food, so perhaps restaurants had bands and chorus girls. But why Chinese restaurants? Were there chorus girls in Chinese restaurants? Well, there were, but not in New York City. In San Francisco, this became a thing. Patrons were promised a taste of China, but really it was more China by way of Hollywood. The Chinese-American chorus girls might make their entrance in modest cheongsams, but they'd quickly strip down to chorus girl outfits. And it fits. Most noir films took place in San Francisco. New York had cop films. Yeah, and so, yes, the Radio City Rockettes. Very pretty, but not chorus girls. Thank you. Oh, of course. Are you kidding? And the after party will begin in a secret place. You look under your chairs to see if you have an invitation. Are there questions? Sure. I must admit, I read from something I wrote. During COVID, I wrote for the Roosevelt Island Historical Society. In 50 weeks, I wrote 1,500-word essays on everything I could possibly remember. I delivered every Wednesday morning, I delivered 1,500 words. I got $25 a piece for them, and I loved it. And this is just a pastiche of a couple. I couldn't resist. I'm very sorry. I should have had something more elegant. The thing that interests me here is that in the 20s and 30s, Chorus Girls was not a bad life. I mean, it was a tough life, to be sure, but it was something very glamorous. We think in the movies of the 50s and 60s, you always see the bad side of all this. But if you think of Hollywood in the 1920s and 30s, it was the same thing. This is where young girls, young women flocked. And so I don't think it was as, well, I don't know how bad it really was. Sex was always an issue. But it was a moment, a career for many young women from the countryside or whatever to come to New York, to go to Hollywood and play in the big leagues. And I think that's what surprised me most, and how young they were. There were no laws about such things. Okay. Yes, sir. Oh, Ted. Yes. I said very pretty, but not chorus girls. This is really, yeah. Good high kickers and very pretty dancers, but not, chorus girls really, you have to think of them as being a little more down to earth somehow a little more relationship with the patrons of, I mean, it is supposed to be sexy. That's the whole point. There's a very funny ad of a cartoon from New Yorker of, it's a woman, a chorus girl, at one of the big clubs, the Coco Bass, and talking to a patron. And because the floors were very narrow, small. And she says, Mabel's not here tonight. She burnt her rear end on a hot potato. So, I mean, yes, other questions? Anything else I could? Yes. Oh, it's a, oh, well, for the Rockettes, it's a very big deal. It's a very hard life, and there is no interaction with men. I mean, this is almost monastic, not monastic. What's the other? Nunnery. I mean, and the hardest thing is when they kick, they're not allowed to hold hands or touch each other. That must take years to learn. No, but that's Radio City. That's not Chorus Girls, I think. Again, it's for the out of towners. The one thing about New York in the 20s and 30s, it was the hometown people, partly because it was so linked to Prohibition. I mean, when you read that, it is very closely tied to, that's the revenuers coming after us. That's how closely that was all tied. And and Prohibition really did create New York nightlife. And it made it a lot racier, and because it was, no one got busted. You have to wait a long time. Jimmy Walker, remember Jimmy Walker Mayer? Went to all these places. I mean, that was and just as a sidebar, you may Do you remember Mae West was busted when she put on a show called Sex? Well, in fact, it wasn't quite the way the story is told because the show had played for a whole year. It was extremely popular despite the worst possible reviews. She said as bad the reviews are, they kept bringing people in. Jimmy Walker went on a vacation, of course, as a mayor went on vacation with a mistress, disappeared in New Mexico, and the guy acting mayor, who was a real Bible thumper, closed down 5 shows that night, and a couple of other things. And Mae West was the only one who would not promise to close the show. She said she went to jail on Roosevelt Island for a couple of days, and she said it was the best publicity anyone had ever given her. And so that's a story of Roosevelt Island and Mae West. There are others too. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah. New York was throughout the 19th century, because it was such a big port. It's okay. I hope New York was such a big port. It was one of the prostitution capitals of the world, certainly of North America. Obviously, there were interaction, but prostitution in that era was really low life. There were, and I wrote a piece about this too, rather elaborate brothels. There were gentlemen's guides published every year that rated 50 or 60 brothels on the quality of the women, the quality of the place, and so on. But I think that life was here. Obviously, it burlesque, it overlapped. During the war, after the war, there was less prostitution in New York afterwards because it was better governed, and the shows were more elaborate. But I don't quite know the, I don't. Yes. Well, yeah, these were. Yes, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, these were the big shows. You talk about Tex Kinnan, but there are a lot of women there too, urging guys on. Yes, and certainly the better stories in that direction are Harlem, because you got caravans of couples, wealthy couples heading up to Cotton Club and many other places to be there. Yes. Well, listen, my job isn't done yet. There are many more chorus girls to be observed carefully. Many more stories to be written.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Great.
Yes. Thank you for coming.
Turn that off and figure out how.
I have the slightest idea. Was that fun? We could talk about Berlin in the 1920s.
Do you want the water?
Oh, yeah.
Went well. A lot GP than I expected.
Well, I tried to make it more jazzy, jumping
Yeah.
one subject to another. I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
want to.
That was
Hello,
good.
Martha.
I don't know the history of the Folies Bergère. Was it earlier than the chorus lines you're talking about? Did they model after the
Folies
Paris?
Bergère, no. Yes. Ziegfeld called his review